Access Lex Institute is a nonprofit organization committed to helping talented, purpose-driven students find their path, from aspiring lawyer to fulfilled professional. In partnership with our nearly 200 member law schools, improving access and positively influencing legal education have been at the heart of our organization's mission since 1983. We have a DC office where we do public policy, advocacy work, fund research, and analyze data related to legal education, and a field team that travels around the country delivering financial literacy information at law schools and undergraduate institutions. We're a nonprofit, and everything we do is free to you. My name is Rachel Patterson, and I'm the Director of Programs for Diversity at Access Lex. I work with students and law school administrators in an effort to increase diversity in legal education. Prior to joining Access Lex, I worked in law school admissions. I've read hundreds of applications, and I am eager to share my knowledge with you today in your quest to attend law school. So let's continue to talk about the final third of your application, that everything else portion of the pie, and we'll start by focusing on the resume. A resume highlights your academic record, extracurricular activities, volunteer and community service efforts, and professional experience. Typically, a resume is around 1 to 2 pages long. Your undergraduate institution likely has an Office of Career Services where there are staff there who can help you with your resume. Remember that the emphasis is on giving an overview of your experiences and your decisions for the past 5 to 8 years. You are not trying to get hired, so you needn't emphasize very particular work-specific experience, like software or other specific tasks. Let's talk about do's and don'ts for your resume. Do always proofread your work. Remember, spell check does not correct all errors. Do check the alignment on your resume. Make sure that you are consistent throughout. Printing your resume can be helpful. It is a great way to catch alignment errors. Do feature the most important aspects of your experiences. So, for example, during college, if you are involved with 15 different organizations, list the ones that are most important to you. Definitely highlight the ones where you had leadership roles. Also, when you feature the most important aspects of your experiences, you provide context for the admissions committee. For example, if you are working 40 hours a week while you are in school, that is really important for the committee to know. It contextualizes your GPA. If you played on a sports team while you're in school, that also provides context and demonstrates your ability to balance academics and athletics. Don't stretch your resume unnecessarily. You don't have to go far back into the archives on your resume. By that I mean there's no need to mention that you were a counselor in training, a CIT at camp when you were 13 years old. If you just graduated from college, you may not have much work experience, if any, and that's okay. Don't try to fill space unnecessarily. A one-page resume is quite commonplace. In addition, your resume shows the extent to which you were engaged on campus. Law schools are essentially trying to find out the answer to 2 questions. 1, can you do the work? And 2, is this the right fit? Many law schools are looking for students who bring unique experiences to the table. Your resume can help schools determine fit. Now, let's shift and talk about letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation are an additional component of your application. Every school requires at least 1. However, schools vary greatly with respect to the number of letters of recommendation that are required. Ideally, you should try to gather at least 3 or 4. Now, who should write your letters of recommendation? Well, remember that you are applying to professional school as opposed to a job. So it is incredibly important that you have at least 1 letter of recommendation from a professor. Law schools want to know about you as a student and as a person. Now, if you've been out of school for 5 or more years and you know it would be difficult or virtually impossible to reconnect meaningfully with a professor from college or graduate school, don't force it. The content of what the recommender says is what is most important. How can you create ease for your recommenders? Well, remember your recommenders are extremely busy. Writing a letter of recommendation is something that they are choosing to do to help you. So it's important to create ease for them, and there are several ways that you can do that. You can do that by providing context for them. So when you reach out to your potential recommenders by email or in person, remind them that you took their class called X in Y year and you wrote a paper entitled Z, and that you enjoyed their class very much. Share your resume with them as well so that they have a robust understanding of your various academic, volunteer, leadership, and professional experiences. If your personal statement is finalized and if you feel comfortable doing so, Share it with your recommenders. It might help them as they craft their letter of recommendation. Also, make sure your recommenders know why you want to go to law school. Remember, a professor may remember you as a student in her Sociology 200 class, but she likely does not know why you want to go to law school. Do give your recommenders at least 3 to 6 weeks. Right? Many recommenders are writing lots and lots of letters of recommendation, so you want to provide them with ample lead time. And do remember that exception. If you've been out of school for 5 or more years and it would be entirely too cumbersome or unrealistic to reach out to a college or graduate school professor for a letter of recommendation, don't worry about it. Reach out to your colleagues, reach out to your supervisors. Now there's one final piece of the application that we haven't yet talked about, and that's the addendum. The addendum appears at the end of your application. It is often the last thing that admissions officers read. The addendum is a space for you to share any additional information that would be helpful for the admissions committee to know. More often than not, it is used to provide context for information that may not be favorable to the applicant. For example, in the addendum, applicants often provide context for things like low test scores, low grades, or health challenges. Some students will explain in the addendum, for example, that they have never done well on standardized tests. However, they have performed well academically, as evidenced by their SAT scores in high school or their high school GPA. Other students will provide context for low grades. Perhaps a student struggled during a particular semester of college because she was originally pre-med and struggled in math and science. However, later, after she switched and became a history major, she flourished academically. The best addenda are boring. They answer a nagging question or cover a gap that an admissions officer otherwise would not know. You'll provide context without making excuses. The admissions reader should shrug and think, that makes sense, and move on to the more interesting parts of your application. Can your addendum cover more than one topic? Yes. For instance, you might need to speak to a challenging semester you had during your sophomore year, and you might also need to have a separate paragraph where you talk about how you typically don't perform well on standardized tests. You can address each of these points in separate paragraphs in the same addendum. Do keep it short. Remember, this is often the last document the committee reviews. 1 to 2 paragraphs is usually sufficient. Usually the addendum is bringing attention to something that is not necessarily a positive part of your application. You're calling attention to a challenge you had or currently have. You don't want to spend a long time talking about it. Give the committee the information they need to know. Do provide context and don't make excuses. It is helpful for the committee to know that you are working or had to provide for your family, right, or that you struggle with standardized tests. But with all of those examples, make sure that you are truly taking accountability for your actions. You don't want to make excuses. There is a fine line between providing context and making excuses. So rather than saying you had a really mean professor in your English class as a college freshman and that's why you didn't do well, focus on what you could have done differently to garner a different result. It's not uncommon for people to experience challenges, whether they are personal, financial, academic, or professional. Life happens. The committee wants to know what the challenge was and how you overcame it, so that if a similar challenge arises again, they know that you have the tools and resources to hopefully conquer it. Now let's talk about law school interviews. There are different types of law school interviews that exist. So there are group interviews, alumni interviews, and staff interviews. All law schools don't provide interviews, and all law schools are unable to interview all applicants. But here are some things to remember. If you're not invited to an interview, that is neither good nor bad. Schools cannot and do not interview all applicants. If you are invited to an interview, you should attend, especially if you're interested in attending that institution. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to expand your narrative. Thank you for watching this presentation. We hope that you'll watch all of the videos in this series. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out to us at diversity@accesslex.org.